Order, order. Gregory Stafford to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered the impact of alcohol duty on the UK wine sector. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Turner, and I'm grateful to colleagues for attending this evening's debate. A bit of background and heritage. The United Kingdom has long been a global hub for beers, wines and spirits, dating back to 1638 with the founding of Berry Brothers and Rudd. We are the largest exporter of spirits in the world and the second largest importer of wine by both volume and value. The sector represents some of the very best of British enterprise, from heritage distillers to pioneering new producers who continue to innovate and support our economy. Behind every bottle on the shelf is a small family business, a logistics worker, or a hospitality employee whose livelihood depends on this trade. Each year, the United Kingdom imports the equivalent of 1.7 billion bottles of wine, accounting for 99% of all wine consumed here. This vibrant culture of responsible enjoyment sustains our high streets, supports independent retailers, and provides essential income for pubs and restaurants that continue to face difficult trading conditions. In 2024, over £12 billion was paid to the Treasury in alcohol duty, with wines and spirits contributing £8.5 billion, around 70% of that total. The wider wine and spirits sector generated more than £76 billion in economic activity in 2022, supported £22 billion in gross value added, and sustained over 400,000 jobs. But when over 60% of the cost of a bottle of wine is tax, we must ask who is truly being squeezed, the consumer, the publican, or the common sense of good economic policy. The reality is that the margins for producers and retailers are tightening. There is a limit to what the British public are willing to pay before they simply choose to stay at home. Changes in duty directly alter prices on the shelf and on restaurant wine lists. Every percentage point of duty may appear small in Whitehall, but for many businesses, it is the difference between survival and closure. Treasury Wine Estates, the producer of brands such as 19 Crimes and Penfolds, has warned that further tax increases will deepen pressure on hospitality. Their managing director of global premium brands, Angus Lilly, stated that higher costs mean tougher choices for local pubs, higher prices for consumers, and less money circulating through the hospitality sector that keeps our towns and cities vibrant. A recent YouGov poll commissioned by the Wine and Spirit Trade Association found that 1 in 4 regular drinkers will buy less alcohol from shops if prices continue to rise, and 2 in 5 will reduce their consumption in pubs and restaurants. In my constituency, we have excellent local brewers such as Tilford and Kilnside, and craft distillers such as Hogmore Distillery, whose team I had the pleasure of visiting recently and sampling their locally made spirits. These are small, creative producers who bring jobs, pride and flavour to their communities. But they will not survive if the alcohol industry continues to face relentless pressure from government policy that fails to support its long-term sustainability. If we price people out of the pub, we do not just lose the sale, we lose the cornerstone of British community life. Now, turning to the current picture, sales data illustrates the scale of the problem. In the 12 weeks to mid-June this year, volume sales for wine were down by 3% in the off-trade, rising to 5% for spirits. The picture in the on-trade is even more severe, with wine volumes down by 7% and spirits by 8%. Hospitality has been one of the hardest hit sectors of the economy since the budget, accounting for nearly half of all job losses. We are now taxing our way to lower revenues. This is not a sound economics, it is in fact counterproductive. As one industry voice put it, Britain is becoming the most taxed place to raise a glass and the hardest place to sell one. Colleagues will recall that in 2023, the UK moved from the inherited EU duty framework to a strength-based system, taxing wine by labelled alcohol by volume in 0.1% increments. Alongside this reform, the headline rate increased in August 2023 and by a further 3.65% in February of this year. For a 14.5% ABV wine, that represents a cumulative increase of around 44% in just 18 months.
And on that point, would you give way?
I'm happy to give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for securing this debate and for giving way. On the point of excessive tax inhibiting entrepreneurship, I visited Ned Orty and his family, who run the Oakley Vineyard in my constituency in Cannington. And they pointed out to me that it is perverse that in the United Kingdom, We have a duty relief scheme for small brewers and distillers, but we have no similar scheme for small vineyards. And I wonder if my honourable friend would agree with me that a small duty relief scheme for small producers would help English wine producers, and we could all raise a glass to that.
My honourable friend makes an absolutely correct point, and indeed preempts something I was going to say later on about the inconsistencies and unfairness of the current system. I think the current small producer relief is capped at 8.5%, and I do think the government should look at what it can do for those smaller producers that he mentions. Now, the Taxpayers Alliance has highlighted that the UK has the third highest wine duty in the world, now at £2.44 per bottle, an increase of 9% since 2023. By comparison, France charges the equivalent of just 2 pence per bottle, Romania 1 pence, and Spain applies no excise duty at all. In fact, half of the EU's 27 member states do not charge duty on wine whatsoever. And when neighbouring countries impose far lower rates, our competitiveness suffers. We pride ourselves on being a global trading nation, yet we've priced ourselves out of the very markets we helped to create. Labour's current approach, I think, is short-sighted and self-defeating, taxing ambition, throttling innovation and penalising productivity. The Treasury cannot build growth by breaking the back of the very industries that deliver it. As Winston Churchill put in 1904, you cannot tax your way to prosperity any more than you can drink your way to sobriety. Turning to what my honourable friend just mentioned, the inconsistencies and unfairness in the system, products between 8.5 and 22% ABV are taxed at the same rate per litre of pure alcohol, yet beer between 3.5 and 8.4% ABV pays more than twice as much duty as cider of the same strength. Small producer relief, while welcome in principle, is capped at 8.5% ABV and therefore excludes virtually all winemakers and distillers. This policy fails to support small English wineries such as Chapel Down in the constituency of my honourable friend for the Weald of Kent, Nye Timber or Camel Valley, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which contribute to rural employment and agricultural production. I will.
Honourable member for giving way, and he's making a fantastic speech. I agree with everything he's saying. On the small wine producers, West Dorset is blessed with 11 fantastic small vineyards. For most of them, the primary route to market is through local shops and rural pubs. And does he agree with me that unless we raise the threshold to create equality in the marketplace or a fairer system alongside small producers of beer, these small vineyards will never have a chance to grow beyond that small area?
I agree with the honourable gentleman entirely. I think it makes very little sense to design a system that essentially punishes small English wineries for doing precisely what we want, namely innovating, employing and exporting. What we need is a tax framework that supports the makers, not merely those who take. And there's a revenue reality to this as well, Mr Turner. Between April and September of this year, receipts from alcohol duty were £300 million lower than during the same period in 2024. And if this trend continues, the Treasury will collect around £1 billion less than forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility. We've reached the wrong side of the Laffer curve, where higher duties result in lower total receipts. The Treasury cannot continue to draw from the same barrel and expect it to refill itself. That should give the Chancellor and the Minister and Treasury officials pause for serious reflection. With the autumn budget approaching, I would be grateful, therefore, if the Minister could address 3 areas of concern. First, whether the government has undertaken or will undertake a full assessment of the impact of successive duty increases on consumer prices, business sustainability and overall tax receipts. Second, whether the forthcoming 3-year review of the duty system will consider whether the current tax by ABV model is appropriate for wine, a product whose alcohol content varies naturally with climatic conditions. Third, whether the government will revisit the structure of small producer relief so that it more fairly supports genuinely small-scale producers, including English winemakers and craft distillers, in line with the original policy intent. And finally, whether the Treasury will review the cumulative impact of wider regulatory costs, such as the Extended Producer Responsibility Packaging Levy, business rates changes, and other compliance burdens, to ensure that these do not disproportionately harm low-margin businesses within the sector. Before I come to a close, Mr Turner, I would like to thank the Wine and Spirit Trade Association and Treasury Wine Estates, whose compelling evidence show a sector under extreme pressure, a tax system that is internationally uncompetitive, an approach that risks delivering diminished returns to the Exchequer. When consumers are price sensitive, when hospitality is struggling, and when revenues are falling despite higher rates, it is right to ask whether the system remains fit for purpose. The objective must be a framework that is fair between product categories, proportionate in its impact, and effective in raising the revenue upon which our public services depend. The UK's wine and spirit sector is one of our quiet economic strengths. It deserves a regulatory environment that allows it to thrive, to invest, and to continue contributing to communities and to the Treasury alike. This government should remember, a thriving economy fills the exchequer, a suffocated one drains it. I look forward to hearing the Minister's response and, in particular, how the government intends to support the stability, competitiveness and long-term sustainability of this vital industry.